Hello and welcome to this session called Blazor and Bot Framework, a Microsoft Teams platform dream team. This is a two-folded session, so I'll be kicking off introducing you to the bot part, and my friend Tommy will then walk you through the Teams tab part with using Blazor and stuff. So my name is Stephan Bisser. I'm working as a technical project lead at Solvion, and besides that, I'm a Microsoft AI MVP. And as said, this is a two-parted session. And my colleague Tommy, who is a team lead at Solvion and a Microsoft Office development MVP, will then introduce you to the more Blazor-ish part of building a Teams application. Before we started the session, I'd like to thank all of the sponsors you see on the slide below. Thank you also to the organizers making that event possible, and I hope that this is one in many to come events on the list. So let's start off. First, what is the Teams platform and how does it fit into Microsoft 365? So as you might know, Microsoft 365 consists of a whole lot of opportunities, platforms, products, services, and whatnot. It spans across all of the client OS types, Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, and even Linux. And it offers a lot of products like Microsoft Teams, like Viva, like SharePoint, Office, and so on and so forth. It's powered by Fluent UI, it's powered by the Graph and the Graph Toolkit. You can build awesome stuff using adaptive cards. If you want to reach any of the information and gather any of the information within the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, Microsoft Graph is the API to go. So it doesn't matter if it's information stored in Exchange Online, in SharePoint Online, in Teams, in Planner, wherever you can utilize the Microsoft Graph to get that information. And obviously, you have a lot of opportunities in the community to evolve that platform if you'd like to. So what is the Teams platform? Teams as a platform offers us ready-to-use applications like the Office 365 applications, ranging from Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, Planner, and so on and so forth, as well as partner-made applications. So for instance, looking at the Teams App Store, you will see that there are not only Microsoft first-party applications available, but also third-party ones like Poly, like Trello, like GitHub, like Adobe, and so on and so forth. So if you're using any of those third-party applications, as of now, you can even use them and embed them right into your Teams context. And on top of that, the Teams platform offers you to build custom apps on top of that. So, for instance, you can build organization-based applications like departmental tools, like supports, like processes and workflows if you'd like to even evolve how your people, how the people you work with the tools they need. And also, Microsoft offers a lot of solution accelerators, templates, and whatnot in terms of verticals and vertical solutions like healthcare, manufacturing, retail, banking, and so on. But what is the Teams platform and what does it offer us? First off, you can bring existing applications into the platform, or you can create new ones and then integrate them into Teams. And by an application, I mean tabs or personal apps. I'm speaking of bots. I'm speaking of messaging extensions, task modules, connectors, notifications, and even meeting apps. And the cool thing about the Teams platform is you can bring in both worlds, existing applications and new ones. So if you've already developed an application in the past and users are using it, and it's maybe a standalone web application, you can integrate that web application, for instance, as a tab or as a personal app right into the Teams client to give people the tools they need within the platform they're using anyways. And you can so build custom apps on Microsoft Teams to meet your unique needs. Of course, you can use the ready-made or ready-to-use applications from the store, but you can even tailor your own applications. And if you're speaking about developing Teams applications, it's not a really developing Teams applications. You will be utilizing the Microsoft Bot framework. For instance, if you're building a bot or if you're building a messaging extension, you will be dependent on modern web technologies like JavaScript and React and whatnot. If you're building tabs or if you're building personal apps, if you're coming from the SharePoint world and if you're familiar with SPFX and SharePoint framework, you can use that already existing know-how to build new applications for Teams based on that platform, based on that framework, or you can bring your existing SPFX applications like web parts and whatnot right into Teams. So you will basically use the know-how and the tools you're already using and you're already familiar with to build and bring applications into Teams. And if you're speaking about citizen development and fusion development, low-code, no-code development, you can of course use the Power Platform to build, no matter if it's Power Apps or Power Automate Flows or PVAs, Power Virtual Agents, or Power BI, you can build those applications using the low-code, no-code approach and bring them into Teams as well. And you can even combine the different development stacks together if you'd like to. And obviously, if you're speaking about developing, you should be using GitHub as a source control and CI/CD platform. You will be using the Microsoft Graph to gather information from any resource in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And obviously, Visual Studio for the .NET developers of you, or VS Code for the more JavaScript, TypeScript developers is the IDE of choice you will be using when building a Teams application. So Teams provides us with a powerful and extensible platform. So you can build apps using a lot of capabilities. As I already said, for instance, tabs, which the main purpose of a tab is surfacing rich content within a team. You can build bots to help users get tasks done in a conversational way. So we're not speaking about visual canvas, we're speaking about that conversational aspect. And we'll see that later on during this session, during my demo in depth. You can, of course, build messaging extensions to allow users to query and share cards in conversations, for instance. Or you can make use of notifications to post updates to channels via a connector. So in any case, if something happens in, let's say, a third-party system, you can use a connector to post an update right directly into a channel to make people aware that something has been happening in any other application. And of course, you can build task modules to initiate or complete tasks or display information. As I said, all of those capabilities are based on the Microsoft Graph, where you can basically get your data from. And the other part about the Teams platform, and this is why it's so powerful, it's a holistic platform. So you, as an enterprise developer, you'll get the tools you'll need to build apps and also upload the apps you're building onto the organization's app store. As an ISV partner, if you want to build an app for the public Teams app store, you can do so by publishing the app to Microsoft App Source. And as an admin, in turn, you can assign policies for that apps, which the enterprise devs or the ISV partners build. You can manage the whole app lifecycle if you'd like to. You can pre-install apps for certain groups of people. You can pre-pin apps and therefore drive adoption of the applications your end users should be using. And the easiest way to get started building apps with Teams is by using the Teams toolkit. So no matter if you're familiar with JavaScript or TypeScript, you can install the Teams toolkit in VS Code. If you're familiar with .NET, you can use Teams toolkit which still is in preview for Visual Studio, which gives you a lot of capabilities like the project generation. So you can, quite easily let the Teams toolkit scaffold out the project for you. You have that F5 experience. So after a couple of seconds, you will have a ready-to-use application, which should act as a boilerplate code for you to then evolve to your application. You have single line auth implemented, so you don't need to care about authentication and identities anymore. You have the graph included automatically, and a lot of other stuff happening behind the curtain. So it's a really, great toolkit to get you started. But for this part of the session, as said, we'll be focusing on the bot part. So we'll be looking at the tool or the platform offered by the bot framework team, which is called Bot Framework Composer, a visual interface for building bots. And we'll be building a bot starting from scratch, which is all powered by the graph, which lets us grab information from the graph, for instance, about our reports or something else, and the teams we're a member of, and then, give people the opportunity to have a conversation with a bot and retrieve data ranging from the graph in a conversational manner. So we'll look at that. And as I said, afterwards, Tommy will kick off with how to build a tab using the Teams toolkit and Blazor. So as I said, we want to build a bot, right? So what I've opened up right now is what's called Bot Framework Composer. So it's the visual authoring canvas, which is built on top of the Microsoft Bot Framework SDK, where you can build bots without writing too much code, right? So we'll see if we want to create a new one. We have a lot of samples in there, like an empty bot, a core bot with language, and so on and so forth, which you can pick and choose from. And for the sake of simplicity, I'll go with an empty bot. So I'll select the empty bot. I'll select the folder where the bot should be stored, because what Composer actually does for you is it generates a whole project for you. So a Visual Studio project, you can see there you can pick and choose from the runtime type, so you can run your bot on Azure Web App or even on functions, and we'll create the bot for using Composer. So while it's doing that, we'll be switching off to the Azure portal, because we don't need only a Composer-based bot, we also need an Azure service. So we will create a new Azure resource, which is called Azure Bot these days. So this is the new Azure service, which was in the past called Bot Gen Registration Service. We'll give it a name. We'll select the resource group. We can change the pricing tier if you'd like to. We'll select multi-tenant because we want to eventually include authentication as well. And we want to get a new Microsoft App ID generated for us. So we let that create. And you see on the right hand side, it creates a new App ID or a new app registration for us. And we should see in a minute that there already are App ID and App Password available. So the resource has been created. We'll see if Composer is already ready. No, it's still downloading the template. So we need to wait a couple of seconds until it's finished, because we'll copy that App ID and App Password from the Azure portal and paste it directly into Composer to make our lives a lot easier. So right now we see it's building the runtime for us, it's merging the packages in, and in a couple of seconds the project should be generated for us on our local disk, and we should be ready to go. See, now the bot is ready, so we'll go to the configure or settings pane, grab the app ID from the Azure portal, paste it in. Same is true for the app password, so we'll copy that one and paste it in. And right now what we could do basically is we could already run our bot. So if I would go ahead and select start now, it starts a new web server on my local host, and we should be able to communicate with our bot. Obviously the bot is not that intelligent, so we see we only have a greeting and we have an unknown intent in here, so we won't do much. But the cool thing about Composer is we have an integrated web chat we can use. So it opens a web chat pane right in Composer, so we don't need the bot framework emulator anymore. It will greet us with welcome to your bot, and whenever I say something, it will basically respond with sorry, I didn't get that. So the next thing we need to do in order to make our bot a bit intelligent is we need to paste in a LOB key, an authoring key, and select the authoring region. And now what we can do basically is we can finally go ahead and scaffold our dialogues. So let's say we want to use our bot to list information about the teams we have joined. Therefore, we want to add a new trigger, and the trigger type obviously is intent recognized, and we'll give it a name like get my teams trigger, and we paste in certain trigger phrases called utterances. After that's done, we get a new trigger in there. The trigger is empty, but what we can do right now is we can start a new or begin a new dialogue right from that trigger. And that dialogue may be called something like get my teams dialogue, and off we go. And obviously we want to leverage the graph to get certain information about my joint teams. So what we need in the first place is authentication. So we want the user to log in. And in order to do so, we will kick off a new dialogue. And this time, this dialogue is called Oauth dialogue. So you want to have the authentication being handled in a separate dialogue. And in there, we say we want to access an external resource, and there's a pre-built Oauth login action available to us. So what we can do right now is we can say we want to kick off a new Oauth login, and we'll give it a name, and we'll see where that name comes from later on. And we also eventually say something like please sign in, and we'll give it a title like login, and we'll see that the token we get returned by this Oauth login action is stored in the property called turn.token, and we'll use that later on. But in fact, we need to configure something in our Azure AD side to make the authentication available. So we'll switch again to the Azure AD portal, and we'll directly jump to the Azure bot which we've created earlier. And as you might know, each Azure bot consists of an Azure AD app rack in the backend, and we'll manage that first. So we'll go to our Azure AD app registration. We need to paste in, we need to tweak some platform configurations, because we need to make that Azure AD app aware where we should redirect our authentication process to. So we'll go to token.botframework.com. And also what we need basically is we need to add certain API permissions. So we need first off, obviously, the Microsoft Graph. And then we want to have something like sign the user in, get the user's basic profile. We also want to eventually get the mails, for instance, and maybe because we want to read out teams details, we want to get the team read basic all. And last but not least, we need to want to read the users, because maybe we also want to read the delegates or the reports of a specific user. And as I'm an admin, I can already grant that admin permission, and off we go. So next, switching back to our bot, going back, what we need basically is a new Oauth connection setting. And therefore, we'll select, or we'll give it a name, and that's the exact same name we have pasted in Composer. AAD-SPI was the name. And then we go back to Composer to grab the client ID and grab the app secret, because we need to paste that in. And then the grant type obviously is authorization code. The login URL we want to use is login.microsoft.com. The resource URL is the graph. And then we'll add the scopes we have defined in our API permissions and add that to our Oauth connection settings. And right now what we can do is we can test the connection to see if it's working. So I'll be authenticating against that Azure AD app rec, and it says succeeded, so it should be good to go. Another thing, in fact, I'm not going to deploy the bot, so I'm using ngrok as a messaging endpoint, and I'll paste that in as well in here. So going back to Composer, going back to the Oauth login dialog, we should have everything in place right now. So we have set up everything in Azure, we have set up the Oauth login, and then we can end this dialog and go back to the previous one, getting the teams, get the my teams. And right now we want to hit the graph to retrieve certain information about my joined teams. And to do so, we'll use an action called send an HTTP request. The method is get. The URL is graph.microsoft.com v1 me joined teams. We also need to add specific headers to accept application JSON. And also we need to add the authorization hierarchy to the authorization headers. And remember, in the Oauth login dialog, the token is stored in a property called turn.token, but that's the whole value of the token with the metadata, and we want to just use the token value of that, and therefore we'll go to turn.token.token, and that should be it. But there's a more easier approach of using the graph, because Composer actually offers us a package manager and pre-built packages. So we see in here, for instance, that there's a package for graph, so we can install it. And while it's installing it, you'll see it's going to a public Nugget feed. So there are packages developed and maintained by Microsoft, and there are packages developed and maintained by the community. This specific one is a Microsoft owned package, so you can use that one. And now what we can do is we have a new pane in here saying Microsoft Graph, and we can now go ahead and select get the signed in user's profile. And as you see, this is by far more easier than just using HTTP request, because we need just to insert the token and we need to tell this action where the result should be stored. And the other thing is, and I don't know if you have ever experienced that, but to get the user's profile photo, it's simple as that. Select the resort property, select the token value, and select user ID, and off we go. And what we can do right now is we can set a lot of properties we have gotten from our HTTP request and the graph actions. So first off, we wanna get the user display name, and the user's display name is coming from this action get signed in user's profile. We want to get the user's mail, so therefore we'll utilize the same notation, and we want to get the teams count, so how many teams is the user a member of, and also, and this is coming from the HTTP request, and the reason why we're using an HTTP request is that this specific endpoint is not yet available in the graph package. And we also want to store a new property, which is a profile card. And you can not only store string values, but you can also go ahead and store like JSON objects. And that JSON object eventually is an adaptive card representation. So if I now go ahead to the adaptive card designer to view that specific JSON as an adaptive card, I'll paste it in here and we'll see it's a template, so it should be displaying a photo, it should be displaying the user's display name, the user's email address, and the text member of XYZ teams. Going back to Composer, what we can do now is to respond to the user whenever he asks for his team's information with an adaptive card. And to do so, we'll send a response, and the response is not of type text, but the response is of type attachment. And we'll add a custom attachment, and we just say we want to get the dialog.profile card, which is our adaptive card, and cast that as a JSON and send it out. As simple as that. So if I now go ahead and start the bot, what I can do right now is, after it's been started, I can go ahead and again use the integrated web chat, so I don't even need to go to Teams. But we'll do that in order to demonstrate on how to fully debug your Composer-based bot using Teams. So we'll wait until it started. We'll see it's giving us a port, localhost 3980, and I've already started my ngrok, and it's listening to that port and it's pointing to my ngrok URL. And right now, what we can do is we can create our new Teams application. But before we do that, we need to enable Teams as a channel in our Azure bot. So we'll go to Channels, select Teams, agree, and save. And that's it. Right now, our bot becomes Teams aware, and we'll be able to reach our bots in Teams. And in order to test our bot, we'll need to create a new Teams. So we'll go to Teams. In my case, it's the web portal, but it doesn't matter. Open up the developer portal and create a new app and give it a name. Insert the basic information like the description, the long description, and please input meaningful information. The company name, which is in my case Solvion, the company website, which is solvion.net, and I'll use the same things for the privacy in terms of use URL, the application ID, and now we need to go back to Composer, grab the application ID from here and paste it in and hit on save. Then the next thing is we need to add certain app features, and as we're building a bot, we'll select bot. We will enter the bot ID again, which is the same application ID. We'll select the scope, so our bot could be added to a one-on-one chat, a team, and a group chat if we'd like to. Hit on save. And then what we need basically is also we need to make sure that our authentication goes through. So we'll add token.botframework.com, and we can select preview in Teams. And now we'll see, funnily, that a small hiccup, but it should be there. So we've installed it, and the bot already greeted us with welcome to your bot. And if I now go ahead and say list my teams and enter, what it should do actually is, first off, it should ask us for signing in. So we'll log in. There's this pop-up. I'll select the user, and off we go. And now remember, we should be getting the card. And unfortunately, something is not really working out with my exact user. So therefore there's no card picture, and it can't retrieve, I don't know why, the count of my teams, but we'll still see it's possible. So we can now go back to, and now it's getting the profile image. So I don't know what's happening in the background. So we can go ahead and add more functionality to our bot. So we'll go to Composer again, and we'll make sure that the teams count. That should be fine. So we can now go ahead and build a new dialog to retrieve information about my reports, because maybe I'm leading a team or something similar, and I want to quickly retrieve information about my reports. So we'll add a new trigger, give it a name like get reports trigger. Again, input trigger phrases for Louis, and do the same thing as before. We'll add or begin a new dialog. The dialog should be named get reports dialog. And there we go. And then what we need to do first, obviously, again, is we want to kick off the Oauth dialog, because we don't know which dialog will be run first. So we'll make sure that the user is signed in. And then again, we'll get the signed in user's profile using that Microsoft Graph action. We'll store that in turn.user. The token property is still the same as before. And then we can get the direct reports of a user using the Microsoft Graph action. And we'll say this is stored in turn.reports. The token is still the same, and the user ID is equals turn.user.id. So the thing we retrieved by getting the signed in user's profile. And then what we can do basically is we could stay in that dialog, but maybe wanna separate the logic a bit. So we'll create a new dialog to actually set up the profile reports cards. So we wanna get not only basic information about the user or about the reports, but we want to retrieve extended information. We want to visualize that in a special way. We want to visualize that using an adaptive card. So we'll do a loop for each item. And that loop for each item is done by looping over turn.reports. And in here, for each report, what we'll need is basically we'll need a couple of things, like we'll need the profile of that specific report and store that in turn.report. Token property is still the same. And the user ID is the user ID within that specific for each loop. And we want to limit down the properties we want to get back. So we want to get back the reports display name, we want to get back the reports mail, we want to get back the reports business phone, the department, the job title, the office location, and we want to get back the given name. So those are the things we want to get back for that specific report. Then we also want to get back the report's profile photo. So we'll leverage the exact same thing as before, but we'll not use my user ID. We want to use the report's user ID. And then what we can do is we can set a new property. And again, we'll not set the property being a type of string. We use basic information which can then be used in an adaptive card, like the display name, the mail, the photo, and so on and so forth. And then what we want to do next is we want to push that specific JSON object to an array. And in order to do so, we use the edit an array property action. The type of change is obviously push. The array should be called user.reports, and the information we want to paste in is turn.report details. And then what we also want to do next is we want to again set a new property of which is called turn.report card, and in there we want to paste the information of that specific report, and we'll see that later on how that report card should be looking like. And the last thing we need is again a property, and it's not setting a property, but it's editing an array. So we'll use the same action as before. Type is change. The array is called user.reportCards, and the property we want to push in is turn.reportCard. And after we've done that, we can end this dialog, go back to the get reports dialog, and then what we basically can do, is we can send a new response, and the response will be again of type attachment, and we'll send out the user.reportCards as an attachment whenever the user asks us to get something. And then the last thing we need to do is we'll need to delete the properties of user.reportCards and user.reports in order to avoid that there are some misbehaviors after that. And what we can do right now is we can now run and test the bot to see if it's working. So again, hitting restart, it will stop the bot, and then it will start a bot again to see and make debugging available in Teams. Taking a bit of time because right now we have added some logic to our bot, so it should be taking a couple of seconds until our bot is restarted and until we can test it again using Teams. So now it should be able to be tested in Teams. Now going back to my Microsoft Teams web client, pasting in something like show me my reports. What it should do now basically is it should skip the authentication dialog, because we should already be having the Bureau token because we have already logged in, and we'll get the adaptive cards represented with the information about the reports. And so we'll see we have a report called Thomas Gölles with his contact information like his email, his chat address, his work phone, job title, and whatnot. And we even can utilize the buttons on top to start a chat. So how cool is that? I can now click that button, that Teams button, and it will bring me to the chat with my colleague Tommy. Pretty awesome. But the visualization isn't the best it could be. So we'll see two adaptive cards below each other. So we want to change that, and we want to change that by going back to Composer to that send a response action, and you see on the right hand side the layout is of type list. We want to select layout is carousel, restart the bot again, and what it should basically do right now is it shouldn't give us back the two adaptive cards of both of our reports or both of my reports below each other. It should allow us to swipe through the report cards in a carousel. So going back to Teams, again, inserting show me my, or what was it, show my reports was the trigger phrase, I believe. And we shouldn't get two adaptive cards or two separate messages. We should only get one. And this time we'll see it's an adaptive card carousel, so I can swipe through the information and I can get the detailed contact information of my reports right in here. How cool is that? With a bit of an effort, we build an awesome bot, sophisticated bot, leveraging the Microsoft Graph to gather information about, anything which could reside in Microsoft 365. And that brings me to the end of my session, where I want to make you aware of the Microsoft 365 patterns and practices, community initiative, where it's about learning, reusing, sharing. So learn, share, reuse. Sharing is caring. Where I'm a proud member of. We have we have a lot of cool opportunities in there. We have a lot of samples out there, not only for Teams, but for the whole Microsoft 365 platform. We have a huge amount of contributors on GitHub. We have a lot of open source components, which could be used in your tenant as well. So go and check it out if you haven't already. And for the next steps, check out the Teams templates. There are a lot of examples out there of how to extend Teams. Try out the Teams toolkit. Tommy will walk you through that in the next session. Anyways, if you want to learn more about building Microsoft Teams apps, go to aka.ms/start-teams. And if you haven't checked it out yet, go to aka.ms/BF Composer to get started with Bot Framework Composer. And with that, I want to ask you the last question of this session. What are you going to build? Thank you for taking time. Thank you for your awareness. Thanks again for making that awesome event possible. And please, please, please join Tommy's session, Blazor and Bot Framework Dream Team, the Teams part, which is in a couple of minutes. See you soon. Take care and stay safe. Thank you.